Hello, I'm Nathan Lillegard, Program Manager of the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Oregon's Lundquist College of Business. Today, I'm here to share with you some highlights from the 2020 Oregon Capitol Scan. First, I want to acknowledge that this project is a huge team effort. A massive thanks to our student research team who worked remotely throughout the COVID summer of 2020 and into fall of 2020 to help produce this report. Miranda Menard, Ethan Reif, Darini Srivasanan, William Sullivan, Alvia Wilcox, all of them brought energy, insight, and drive to this effort. The Oregon Capitol Scan is supported by a grant from the Oregon Community Foundation and guided by a committee of stakeholders in government, business, and philanthropic organizations invested in the Oregon business community and our economy. The audiences for the Oregon Capitol Scan are quite focused. We work with or focus on economic development practitioners, government representatives and their staff, and ecosystem builders and supporters. These three groups can use the data in the report to understand the current state of capital flows and then assess where and how policy or program changes might have the desired effect. To improve the report and offer more insight, we've brought in some new data sets in the 2020 Capitol Scan. City and county grant information and loan information were cataloged through direct primary research. Credit union business lending was reported from NCUA reporting that credit unions do. And data on activity from the largest national banks is captured through the Community Reinvestment Act reporting data. Each of these data sets contribute to a much more complete picture of the capital landscape than has ever been presented in the Oregon Capitol Scan before. I want to stress that, however, that this report is not intended to capture all of the minute details of capital flows throughout the state. Instead, it is a scan of activity that should encourage further research and exploration of specific topics of interest. Much of the data here reflects activity only through 2019 based on the reporting timelines of various agencies and programs. So the data in this report will need to be updated throughout 2021 to offer more detail on various programs and activities. The Capitol Scan covers data across the spectrum of the business development timeline, beginning with startup funding and progressing to launch funding and moving up to growth funding. Our report aligns with how a business might experience the capital landscape as they grow. However, in 2020, we have to acknowledge that the CARES Act and the funding that came from that piece of legislation in response to the COVID-19 pandemic plays a really important role in the picture of capital activity in 2020. In fact, the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program had a massive impact on the flow of capital in Oregon during 2020. Over $8 billion in PPP loans touched every corner of the state for small and large firms in all industries. Logically, a greater percentage of these PPP loans were for a larger amount in the more populous and economically active regions of the state, including the Willamette Valley and Portland Metro region. Conversely, the least populous regions, South Central Oregon and Northeast Oregon, received a higher percentage of smaller value loans from the Paycheck Protection Program. Further rounds of Paycheck Protection Program funding and additional impact of the CARES Act should be considered in future Capitol Scan reports. For the earliest stages of startup funding, the Capitol Scan evaluated crowdfunding and federally funded grant programs. While crowdfunding, through platforms such as Kickstarter, were a significant source of new capital for entrepreneurs in the 2014 to 2017 timeframe, the popularity of this approach to early stage financing has waned in recent years. Crowdfunding continues to serve as a tool for many new and established companies to launch new products and connect with their customers. Oregon's decline in the flows of this type of capital aligns with an overall decrease in the crowdfunding activity that we've seen nationwide. Capital from federal small business development grant programs in Oregon has remained relatively constant when compared with other Western states. Given the size of Oregon's federally funded research activity, Oregon's SBIR and STTR grant levels have been steady in relation to states such as Colorado and Washington, both of which have significantly higher levels of federal research spending. As we move on into launch funding, we'll look at SBDC programs, state, city, and county programs, SBA Lending, and angel investments. The SBDC network, Small Business Development Center Network, is one of the key pillars in the state for entrepreneurs. This organization has continued serving clients of all types and sizes of businesses throughout the state, serving over almost 6,000 customers every year. The impact of the SBDC is clear when you see that over 640 companies have been started in the most recent year with the guidance from the advisors and volunteers of this organization. New to this edition of the Captial Scan is data on city and county grant and loan programs. The scope and scale of these programs varies widely. Cities have more active and longer established business funding programs than counties, while only a few counties offer any loan or grant programs. Interestingly, Prosper Portland, the economic development agency in the Portland metropolitan region, has a loan portfolio nearly equal to the amount of loans made by all other cities in the state. This represents a potential opportunity for cities and county governments to expand their support for business funding. One of the most consistent and common ways to assess activity for small business capital formation is to review loans made by banks and backed by the Small Business Administration. SBA lending is definitely a lagging indicator on the flows of capital to businesses, but it does offer some insights into trends. Noting that, we found a drop in SBA-backed lending in Oregon in 2019 with a relatively healthy rebound in 2019. While it's a limited data set, SBA lending does offer a window into the challenges for diverse communities growing their businesses in the state of Oregon. SBA data through 2019 shows that the vast majority of loans in Oregon go to white-owned firms. Now, the challenges of business funding, including that of SBA lending, for BIPOC communities in Oregon has been recognized by many, and several new and innovative programs have been established just in the past year to begin to address these challenges. Angel investment is often the first stage of outside funding that many businesses receive. A major challenge with tracking angel investments is gathering the data. While we at the Oregon Captial Scan use a data set from PitchBook, identifying where angel investors are from, even within that data set, is a challenge. We see that the largest slice of investors identified in that data set don't have an identifiable location. Of those that can be identified, we see that the majority of angel investors in firms based in Oregon come from California. So there's clearly an opportunity for improved tracking of angel investments that might potentially open a window into how you might expand angel investment in the state. Now we'll close our overview of the Captial Scan by looking at growth funding in the form of venture capital and commercial lending. Looking at venture capital activity in the Western United States, it is clear that Washington, Utah, and Colorado garner higher levels of VC activity than here in Oregon. However, in relation to the overall business activity, that SBIR grant funding activity, and other metrics, Oregon continues to have a relatively healthy level of venture capital investment. In fact, we see in our trends since 2014 that Oregon has had a very strong run of venture capital investment activity in the 2018 and 2019 timeframe. Oregon firms raised a record $940 million from venture capital investors in 2019. While we see that there's definitely a sharp drop in activity in 2020, there are, however, some hopeful signs in the data. Large, later stage investments drove the record amount of VC activity in 2018 and 2019. With the overall market dropping, there is a hopeful sign in the growth of angel investment rounds in 2020. These earliest investments indicate that there will likely be many firms poised for growth if the economy responds to stimulus and begins to improve in 2021 and beyond. One of the common themes from previous versions of the capital scan has been limited local venture capital activity. We see from the data that there are several firms based in Oregon that are very active investing in Oregon-based businesses. What that means, though, while Oregon VC firms make many investments in Oregon-based companies, those companies often need to go outside the state to find larger amounts of capital for growth. And many large venture capital firms are very active here in the state of Oregon. Included for the first time in this edition of the Capital Scan, credit union business lending is an important component of the capital landscape. Total business lending by Oregon-based credit unions was over $450 million in 2019. While not as large as traditional bank lending, this does significantly exceed the total of SBA-backed lending in the state. And we see that credit unions are also a geographically dispersed source of capital. Contrary to almost every other metric we track in this report, the Portland metro region is not the largest region for credit union lending. That honor goes to the South Valley Mid-Coast region. This reflects both the number of credit unions based in that region, but also the strong ties that these institutions have to their local business community. Adding to the report this edition is data from the Community Reinvestment Act. These data indicate that the most active business lenders in the state were Wells Fargo and U.S. Bank until the merger of Columbia State Bank, based in Washington, and Pacific Continental Bank, then based in Eugene. This indicates that there remains a strong presence of Pacific Northwest regionally based banks in the Oregon business lending market. Looking at where those national banks are most active, we see that Roseburg-based Umpqua leads the market in the South Coast and South Central regions. Banner Bank, headquartered just north of the border in Walla Walla, Washington, is the most active in the Northeast region of Oregon. And Columbia State Bank then covers the majority of the rest of Oregon's regions as a leading commercial lender, only surpassed by Wells Fargo in Southern Oregon and the Portland metro region. This report offers an interesting window into what we can clearly call the before times. Ideally, this gives policymakers and others a more clear picture of the levels of activity that will signal a return to normal. Oregon's capital ecosystem is diverse. Business lending comes from many sources, including city governments, credit unions, and local and regional banks. Risk capital in the form of equity investments by angel investors and venture capital firms remains strong, with some indicators of future strength to be found in the early stage activity. Finally, the government programs that support and guide the flows of capital are varied geographically and in purpose, but many of those programs are well targeted and quite effective. I know we didn't have time to cover all of the details in this quick introductory video. So if you'd like more information about the Oregon Capital Scan and to download the complete 2020 report, please visit the website here. And if you have specific questions about the material presented in this video or the report, I would be happy to connect with you. Please reach out to me via email. My address is on the screen. Thank you for your time and interest in this project.